Hello, and thank you for joining for this reflection, which is from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14, verses 13 to 21. Such a famous passage about a miraculous intervention from Jesus feeding a crowd of 5,000 people. So, Matthew chapter 14, verses 13 to 21. When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. When Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." "But we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish," they answered. "Bring them here to me," he said, and he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. It's interesting, isn't it, that the passage begins when Jesus heard what had happened, and then he withdrew by boat privately. So what on earth, what was this news he'd heard? Well, immediately preceding this passage in chapter 14 of Matthew, we have this awful scene with Herod and Herodias, his wife, and their daughter, and John the Baptist. And John the Baptist, who had annoyed Herod by challenging the appropriateness of his marriage to his brother's wife, John the Baptist was beheaded. And his head was served on a platter to Herod's daughter-in-law, Herodias. So we've got this almost a grotesque culinary theme, haven't we? We think of food being delivered on a platter, and then we morph straight into this passage, which is also about food, isn't it, and eating, but it's in a very different context. And the contrast with what Jesus is doing here is quite significant, isn't it? It's all about food, isn't it, and material things. And of course, in this time, a lot of people and the crowds who were there would have suffered from food shortages, inequalities. That was the nature and the injustice of the society they lived in. And so we're in the Bible, we've come across situations before in Exodus where food was provided, and it was God's will. Isaiah declared that God's will that people share your bread with the hungry. And also it comes up in lots of other contexts, this idea of giving to those in need and providing an abundance in the context of scarcity. And this injustice in the Roman world is really the backdrop, isn't it, for this passage. And Jesus here makes that provision. The disciples, ever practical, are worried that these crowds who've gathered won't be able to have their tea, their meal. So they say to Jesus, they better go so they can get something to eat. But Jesus isn't having any of it, is he? Why don't you give them something to eat? Yeah, but hang on a minute, they say. We've only got, a bit of food here. We've only got, a bit of bread and a couple of fish, I think it was, isn't it? That's all we've got. How on earth are we going to feed all these people? Well, in the out of scarcity comes abundance, and the people are fed, and there are some leftovers. At Herod's birthday party, where this awful scene takes place, there the context is celebration, wealth, power, status. Here, we're amongst the poor, the multitude, living in this unjust society. And so we get this life-giving feast which Jesus provides, embodying the glorious abundance of God that we see so many times. So there we are. Jesus feeds the 5,000.